After the Singapore Grand Prix, it's not just the asphalt at McLaren that stayed hot. The team is also burning from within. What looked from the outside like a brief, unfortunate incident is developing behind the scenes into a psychological powder keg. The contact between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri on the first lap was more than just a racing incident. It was a moment that shook the very foundations of trust, loyalty, and power in the most successful team of the last 2 years. At first glance, everything seemed clear. Norris slightly lost control after touching the rear of Verstappen's Red Bull and crashed into his teammate's side. A classic racing moment happened quickly forgotten, one might think. But for Piastri, the reigning championship leader, it was a direct attack on his title fight. On the radio, his voice seethed with anger. "That's not fair," he called out, after the team had decided to take no action against Norris. Subscribe now to not miss any of Formula One's internal power games. Here you get the stories that never make it into press releases. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella immediately tried to smooth things over. In the official interviews, he spoke calmly, controlled, almost clinically. "We will conduct a very detailed analysis. We need to ensure that our drivers maintain confidence in the way we work." But between the lines, it was clear. Trust has already developed cracks. Because for Piastri, it's not just about points. It's about justice. Or rather, the perception of it. He has the feeling that in critical moments, McLaren more readily protects Norris, the British public favorite, the face of the brand. After the race, Sky expert Jamie Chadwick openly stated what many are thinking: the gloves are off. From this moment on, it's a real fight. Andrea Stella knows this. He faces one of the most difficult tasks for a team principal. 2 drivers who must respect each other despite fighting for the same dream at the same time. "It's not just about points," Stella continued. "It's about trust. Our drivers' trust in the integrity of the team is more important than any championship. But trust in Formula One is a fleeting commodity, especially when millions of people analyze every maneuver, interpret every gesture, dissect every radio message. Piastri's anger on the radio became a viral clip within minutes, commented on, parodied, dissected. Meanwhile, McLaren tried to regain public control, with photos, statements, and the familiar formula. We are a team. We remain united. But unity on paper is not unity on track. And Singapore was a turning point. Norris, who had been making up ground in the title race in recent weeks, suddenly looked like the more dangerous, aggressive driver again. For him, the maneuver was no risk, but necessity. For Piastri, it was a betrayal. Both perspectives are understandable, and that's exactly what makes the situation so explosive. Within McLaren, a confidential memo is now circulating. The incident is referred to internally as trust-sensitive, a term used in Woking only when a problem is not purely sporting, but structural. Because McLaren knows if either driver felt treated unfairly, the entire balance could tip. That Stella now publicly announces a very detailed review is no coincidence. It's a preventive measure, a message to both drivers but also to the world. We have everything under control. Only this time it sounds different, because while Stella formulates his diplomatic sentences, behind the scenes, the discussion ferments over leadership style, decision-making processes, and power dynamics. There had already been tensions in the summer when Piastri publicly questioned the team's strategy in Hungary. Back then, everything seemed resolved. But Singapore has reignited those old doubts. We need to ensure we don't rush to judgment, Stella said after the race, because there's a lot at stake here. Between the lines, McLaren is about to lose psychological control. And the irony? While the team in Singapore celebrated its 2nd consecutive constructors' title, the 2 drivers sat with arms crossed in separate areas. The triumph, which was meant to be a symbol of strength, became a stage for subtle tension. Norris himself remained conspicuously calm. No blame, no apology. Instead, sentences that seemed almost rehearsed. It was tight. I had oversteer. That can happen. For Piastri, this wasn't a sufficient explanation. In the box, team members report there was icy silence after the race, but Stella remains optimistic. He points to a similar incident in Canada where Norris took responsibility and both drivers came back stronger afterward. Only, back then, Norris was the culprit and was penalized through his retirement. Now it's Piastri who's paying the price, and that changes everything. The team principal is convinced that an internal discussion can diffuse the situation. "We will talk to both drivers, we will review the data, and include the perspective from the cockpit," he said. "In the end, we will come out of this even stronger, even more united." It's the tone of a man hoping that professional distance is enough to control human emotion. But Formula One is not a laboratory. It's war in milliseconds, adrenaline, pride, and pain. And you can't simply resolve that with an analysis report. Behind closed doors at McLaren's headquarters in Woking, there's no euphoria, only tension. Officially, the team is celebrated for its second consecutive constructors' title. But internally, it's no longer about trophies. It's about control. Control over two drivers whose mutual trust threatens to crumble. Andrea Stella knows that a team fighting for a world championship title needs not just engineers and strategists, but also psychologists. He has witnessed how quickly success can turn into mistrust. Even small misunderstandings transform into rumors, and rumors become narratives. That's exactly what's threatening to happen now between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The two McLaren stars find themselves in a delicate balance. They share a garage, a car, a goal, but also growing mistrust. What began in Singapore as a simple racing incident has long since become a political minefield. In the days after the race, McLaren began a comprehensive analysis. Telemetry data was reviewed, radio messages transcribed, video footage analyzed frame by frame. It was more than just a sporting investigation. It was an internal trust audit. Andrea Stella made clear that this time it wasn't just about who was at fault. He wanted to understand whether the dynamic between the drivers had become dangerous. Because in a team fighting for the championship, even a crack in trust can destabilize the entire structure. "It's not just about points," Stella repeated in an internal meeting. "It's about credibility. If one driver believes the other is favored, then we lose everything." That sentence contains all the truth of the modern Formula One era. Speed is only half the story. Psychology is the other half. Because McLaren stands at a crossroads. On one side is Piastri, young, methodical, ambitious, with the composure of a chess player and the hunger of a champion. On the other side is Norris, charismatic, emotional, under immense pressure to finally win his first world championship. Both drivers are the face of success, but also its greatest threat. After Singapore, Stella met with both separately. First with Piastri. The conversation, according to insiders, was calm but direct. The Australian felt abandoned, not because of the contact itself, but because of the team's reaction. He wanted to see a sign, not against Norris, but for fairness. "I don't feel protected when it counts," Piastri reportedly said. A sentence that's poison in Formula One. Because once a driver believes team management puts loyalty over fairness, he starts protecting himself, strategically, communicatively, mentally. The next day, Stella spoke with Norris. He was also tense, but his perspective was different. For him, the situation was clear. He couldn't avoid the contact with Verstappen. Piastri was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what troubled Stella wasn't the explanation, but the tone. Both drivers believed they were right, and neither was willing to give even an inch. That's why the team principal announced a joint meeting. Not a tribunal, not a mediation session, but what he called a technical and emotional discussion. Both sides were to present their view of things with data, footage, and facts. Behind closed doors, in the Senna conference room, the two sat next to each other for the first time since the incident. Stella presented the analysis, frame by frame, telemetry in real time, overlay of steering inputs. The data clearly showed that Norris, in attempting to avoid Verstappen, had indeed lost control. No intention, no attack, but also no consideration. Then Piastri spoke. Calm, controlled, but with a firm voice. "I understand what happened, but it's not just about this moment. It's about how you react after. I need to know that the team doesn't just listen, but also understands." Norris nodded, said little, but his look was hard. For him, it was clear that any apology would seem like an admission of guilt, and he couldn't afford that in the title fight. Andrea Stella ended the meeting with an appeal. You don't have to like each other, but you have to trust each other. If you lose that, we lose everything. The conversation was factual, professional, but cold. And that might be the most dangerous outcome of all. Because while McLaren shows strength on the outside, internally the feeling grows that the team is balancing on an emotional razor's edge. Zach Brown, who rarely gets involved in sporting matters, is said to have now been personally engaged. He knows, if the atmosphere flips, McLaren doesn't just lose races, it loses credibility. Especially in a season when Red Bull and Mercedes are just waiting to exploit the smallest crack. At Austin, at the next race, both McLaren drivers will start side by side again, officially united. But everyone in the paddock knows it's more facade than reality. Because rivalry doesn't simply switch off. It grows in silence, in radio messages, in looks and gestures. Oscar Piastri knows he has history on his side, the young challenger fighting against the system. Lando Norris knows he has the spotlight on his side, the public favorite who has everything to lose. McLaren now stands between two truths, discipline and freedom. If Stella maintains control, the team can win the title. If he doesn't, Singapore could go down in history as the moment McLaren began to destroy itself. And so, looming on the horizon of the Austin Grand Prix is more than just a race. It's a psychological endgame, a fight for power, trust, and identity. Because whoever no longer trusts his own teammate cannot win a championship. And McLaren knows that all too well.